piston will be on its intake stroke, while the other is compressing, building to maximum pressure. While this is occurring, a constant flow of engine coolant is routed through the cylinder head cavities to dissipate the heat generated by the compressor.
I'm just outside here so that I'm not disturbing my students. But as you can see, I have a YouTube video going on an air compressor and an air system that is part of my training technique for industrial air endorsement. And what I do is go through this particular program, and then we will do a question answer period after. And with this particular program, I have written 5 different tests throughout and a final exam, so that my students give me feedback and knowledge, feedback on the knowledge they've obtained. And this is part of what I do anyway. So I'm not exactly sure what this capstone is, but for now I'm just kind of keeping track of what's going on, and hopefully that makes sense for everyone. So I'm going to continue to make some movies here for just a little bit so you can see what I'm doing.
Piston, inlet exhaust valve, pressure setting spring, and governor unloading port. An air line connects the governor to the supply reservoir. Reservoir air enters.
I'm going to go over a pre-trip with you, and what I'll do is demonstrate it throughout the whole system. We'll run through it all at once, and then what we're going to do is have everybody do it at least once themselves. There's 2 people here that have got the 16-hour program. They may as well go first, and the reason I say that, once they run through it once, they may as well go home, because unless they want to watch, which is fine, they want to keep taking time and time and time. But if you got the 16 hours, you'll know what I'm looking for, you'll understand what they're looking for, and with your class 1 or class 3, you're going to do it a lot anyway. So that's the way that will work, if that's all right. The other thing is, has anybody ever done a pre-trip before? Has anybody actually went through one at any time? You went through a pre-trip before? Right on.
I have as well.
You have as well?
Yeah.
Okay, right on. So there's some experience, and that's good. What I'm looking for is air only. So if this truck for some strange reason has a flat tire, or it's got a broken push rod, or there's something wrong with it, I really don't care. What we're here to do is to do the air brakes and the air pre-trip. So if it's got something wrong, it's irrelevant, because we're not going to drive. We're just going to do our pre-trip. So it's okay for it to be wrong. If you see that it's wrong, let me know it's wrong. I know that it's going to have things. It's a truck. It's like everything else. So the way we'll start is I'll give you a quick run around. I'll show you how you do it. And then one by one, we'll all go through it once. And then I'm going to leave you guys be and let you do it by yourselves for a little bit, so that you can just practice on how to do it, so that when we do our assessment, you're going to be able to do it without your paper, because we have to do it without our paper, okay? That's part of the assessment program. Now, as you can see, it's all in a step-by-step format. Reality is, I don't care how you do it. I do it this way so that it makes sense, so you can kind of get a motion going, and it'll come out in the right direction. But if you get halfway through and think, oh golly, I forgot to do one wheel of brake, for instance, come back and do them. It really doesn't matter, all right? As long as you hit all the key points that I'm looking for, that's what it's about. And I'm no different than any other assessment officer. That's how they do it, so that's how I have to do it. If you, for instance, are in building your air pressure up from 50 to 90, and you don't tell me about the low air warning pressure come on at 60 pounds, that's okay. Fan it back down and then tell me it's on. So it really doesn't matter the rotation of how we do things, okay? Does that make sense for everybody? All right, so the way we're going to start is, I'll start by making sure the wheels are blocked, which is the very first part of all pre-trips or all brake inspections, is to make sure our wheels are chalked. The next thing I'm going to do is release the parking brakes. And to release the parking brakes, I must push in the yellow button, right? So the brakes are released. Now, if you all follow me around the other side of the truck, that's where we drain our air pressure. It's all through. We know our one-way check valve is working. The next we're going to look under the hood. So under the hood, I'm only concerned with the air again. I'm not concerned about fluid levels, oil pressures, nothing like that. Strictly air. So I want to look at the air hoses, which are these plastic lines. I want to make sure you can see my governor and make sure that it's secure. I want to know that the compressor is secure. And I want to know that the lines off of the compressor are secure. So this copper line is the line to the wet tank. The rest of it I'm not concerned about because we're only doing air. Also on the front steering axle brakes, you can see there's a hose here. I want to make sure that it's pliable, that there's no kinks, cuts, or abrasions. Remember them great words? There they are. And make sure that the brake chamber is secure. So I'm going to grab it and give it a little shake. I'm going to take my trusty pry bar and I'm going to pry against my slack adjuster to check travel. And what should the travel be when I do a pry test like this?
About
half to 3/4 of an inch. So when you're doing this for me, I want you to pry it and then tell me how long it is. I don't want you to pry it and go, oh, it's half to 3/4 of an inch. You got to be very verbal. Pull it out and say, oh, it's between half and 3/4 of an inch. If it's 2 inches, I don't care. Tell me it's 2 inches. I want to know that you know what you're doing. So we know that that's secure. We're going to grab our slack adjuster and clevis. We're just going to give it a shake, make sure it's secure. We're going to look inside our wheel and make sure that the brake drum isn't cracked. There's a little rust on it, but it's not cracked. And there's no oil inside the wheel to make sure that it's not contaminated. All right? So that's our ticket on the front wheel. That's all I want to look for. I don't want to look for anything else. We can look through the drum here, but the rest of it is no consequence to us. We're doing air only. We'll go around the truck. Now this is a very tricky slack adjuster, and it's something that you can really knock your knuckles on. Why this side, I don't know, they do. So don't pry it too hard, okay? Because it's just going to slip for you. Because everybody wants to always give it hard, but you don't have to. So give it a little pry. Tell me what the distance is. It's between half and 3/4 of an inch. Have a look inside the wheel to make sure the drum isn't broken. Check to make sure there's no contamination with oil. And you can look through the outside of the drum as well. It's not cracked or broken. That's what I want to know here. All right? As we come back, we're going to look at our hoses and make sure that our hoses are secure and tied up. They're not rubbing. There's no cuts or abrasions. We'll do that all the way down the frame. We'll keep looking at our hoses all the way. All right? Now, when we get to this brake chamber here, if you want to use the, and we're going to grab these hoses and make sure that they're secure. They're not rubbing and getting beat up, okay? And if everybody takes a second now and looks at this brake pot, you'll see that the inputs where the hoses go in are square. So everybody just have a quick look there. Over the hill, you'll see where they're square inserts. No? That's just a matter of they're a long 3-inch stroke pot. So that's the difference of the brake chambers. You see where the hoses go in and they're square now? That's what tells you that it's got a 3-inch stroke. So that's a long stroke brake pot. You notice the one that we had inside was round. That's how you tell the difference. Pretty easy peasy. Make sense?
Yes. What's the wet around
Grease.
Grease a little bit.
We gotta have a little grease. So if everybody understands that, then what we'll do is get on our creeper. The ground is pretty clean here, so I'm not going to use it. Again, under here, we're going to look inside our wheel, make sure there's no oil. We'll take a look in our dust cover, make sure that our brake lining is there and is not contaminated. And this time you put your bar up from the bottom to pry on this slack adjuster so you can see that you can pry it. Can everybody see what I'm doing there? All right,
Yeah.
see where I am at here?
Oh, there.
So
okay.
now you can pry that slack adjuster.
Okay.
So you can tell that it's between half and 3/4 of an inch. So you pry it from the bottom, okay? And we'll all get a chance to do this because we have to. And then we're gonna continue to look at our hoses. We'll do both sides while we're under this side, or under the front rather, so we'll grab both pots. We'll We'll look at our lines to make sure they're good. We'll look inside the drums to make sure they're not cracked and that there's no oil in there contaminating the lining, okay? All right. And I'm not gonna do it, but if you go under the back, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna grab the brake pots, hoses, we're gonna look at our valves, make sure everything is secure and that everything's in good shape, okay? And good is a bad word, remember that. As you can see, these dust covers actually have a hole in them. You can see the brake lining inside the dust cover. So that's what I'm looking at. The brake lining looks good. Now, you see, there's a hole. There's a hole up top, but it's actually the same hole as the bottom.
You can't see anything though.
Oh, if you had a flashlight, you would. And there's one in there.
And a mirror.
And a mirror. Yeah, hold your tongue just right. All right. So, the way this system works is, you have to tell me that the brake pot is secure. You got to tell me the push rod travel, and you have to tell me that there's no contamination or broken drums on each wheel. If you miss a wheel, it's one demerit. If you miss them all, it's one demerit. Crazy as that is. So keep that in mind. Missing all of them is as bad as missing one. Okay, so don't stress yourselves over it too badly, but try and hit every one, because if you hit every one, you know these are the easy ones. Each corner, that's a simple thing to remember, isn't it? So there's no sense losing out over something simple. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is a 1-minute leak test in the truck. Wheel chocks and the buttons in. So what we have to do is get our timer out, which I have a timer in here. You use your cell phone and make a full brake application and hold it for 1 minute, which I'm going to do. And it actually gets hard on the leg. So as you sit here, we're going to watch our gauge after the initial push, because you're going to lose some air right away. After that, you can't lose 3 pounds in how long? Or 4 pounds, right? In a minute. All right. Oh, sorry, 3 psi. Okay, that's a minute. I'm just doing it. What we'll do is check our low air pressure warning test. So if we turn our key on, that's the only way, and this key isn't really good, it's not the right key, but it works. As you can hear, the low air warning pressure is already on, and the light's on in the dash. It comes on at 80 psi. Make sure you tell me that it's on. Normally we'd be up at 100 psi when we do this, but we're kind of in a hurry, so that's okay. We'll do it ourselves, right? Then we're going to fan our brakes down to 50 psi. So this is what fanning the brakes is. And we have to make sure that all the needles are below 50 psi, okay? So one might be down at 30, which this one is, but they all have to be below 50. Then we're going to start the truck. So wiggle the gear shift to make sure it's out of gear. Push the clutch in. 5 psi, the air buzzer went off. It's no longer beeping. All right, that took 1 minute and 47 seconds, I know, because I do it every once or twice a week. And so now that's at 90 psi. So what we want to continue to do now, we'll start it up again. You guys don't have to shut it off, but we'll start it up again, and we've got to build it right to maximum pressure and make sure that our governor kicks out. So when you hear the truck blow off, the air dryer, that's actually coincides with when the governor quits. So if you're wondering when it's going to happen, it will happen with this truck when the governor or when the air dryer blows off. Lots of trucks that doesn't happen. You can just watch the gauge, and when the gauge quits moving, obviously the governor's quit pumping. Okay, so I'm going to build up the air now. Oh, that rotten key. do. And now we want to watch our gauges start to move to know if our governor kick back in. So we're testing the governor. And they're moving. I'm just going to let it build up a little bit for the next person.
So this is also a portion of what I teach as far as air brakes is concerned. This is a foundation brake that I have on a cabinet where I can teach the students how to adjust a manual slack adjuster. I can show them the actual parts of a foundation brake, such as the slack adjuster, the cam tube, the brake shoes, return springs, as well as different types of slack adjusters, automatics, etc. And as well as how to measure and show what the cam stroke actually is. So this is part of what I would use in my air brakes course, and I would demonstrate to them how that would work. I have a tape measure and a little bar and a wrench, and I would get a student up to help me, and we would demonstrate to the rest of the class exactly what's going on. So that's what that particular tool is. I also use different parts of the brake system, which would be diaphragms and gauges, one-way check valves, brake pots, different valves as well. And this particular brake pot I have is a cutout of an actual maxi pot. So I can show them what a spring brake is, how it works, and what the different pieces of a spring brake is, as well as you know, the internal mechanism of the spring brake. And then there's a blue spring on the top of this particular pot, and I have a white spring outside, and that's the same spring that's been caged inside that brake pot. So I can actually give them an actual demonstration of sorts of what kind of pressure is behind that blue spring, so that for safety reasons they never remove the brake clamps. It's done by a certified mechanic. So that's something that I've trained over the last short while. And that's just some of the things that I use for my training techniques. As well as, I use this air brake board, as you can see, that is behind us here, or on the wall now actually. And what I do with my classroom is dismantle this board so there's nothing on it but a few pieces. And then we start with our book and our program and begin with designing brake systems. So we would start with the basic components. We would add it and show exactly how it works. I use the students all the time to perform this task. And we just keep working at it. We go from a basic system to a dual system, with air components for the trailer, all the spring brakes, how it works, what happens if a line ruptures in which part of the program, so that I can demonstrate what would happen in an actual event. And like I say, I tear that brake down so there's nothing on the wall but that little red diagram behind it, and we build it up from there. So that's something that I teach as well as we do a brake course. Most everything that we teach in an air brakes course comes out of the commercial driving guide. Because it's ICBC, we have to have an actual driving guide that we show. So it has to be pertinent to what they're being taught. From that driving guide, I then have 6 different exams that I also get the students to write throughout the course. So as we do different things in the course, I will take and start with a quiz after we read the first couple of chapters, such as that one, quiz 1. And then what it'll do is it gets me to realize, or to understand, assess where the students are in the actual book, to make sure that they have what it's needed. As we go through the book, I keep adding exams, so I have 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 5 exams like this. They're between 1 and 30 questions.
And then I have a final exam at the very end. While they're doing the first 5 quizzes, I allow them to do their own thing. They can go through their books so that they can understand the quizzes, but the final exam I do without a book so that I can assess where they're at in the quiz. Hey!
How's it going?
Good, how are you doing?
Doing well.
This particular little piece of paper I cut into 4 different sections. Then I get my students at the end of day 1 to learn each basic system. I divide them into groups, and then each group does the air brake board. So they actually teach the second part of the lesson themselves and show the other students in the class what they've learned over the night. So it kind of works backwards, that the students have to show each other. And that seems to really work to keep them involved in the class. And again, it just lets me assess exactly what it is that they've learned.